everybody? Welcome back to another page of the playbook. This is Nate coming at you guys with another team in the 32 NFL offseasons in 32 days. We're down to our final 5 teams. I believe 5 or 4 teams, who knows. Either way, today's team, we're going to be talking about the Seattle Seahawks. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to today's sponsors, starting with Gold Fine and Bowles, Lawyers for the Injured. Personal injury, workers' compensation, those are their 2 things, but any sort of legal advice, they're the people to call. Give them a phone call, 309-673-5144. Tell them we sent you, okay? And I'd also like to shout out SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video as well. Use promo code PlaybookSports on their website to get $20 off your first purchase of $30 or more. Let's get back to the video. Seahawks fans, let's talk about last year a little bit here. I personally had so much optimism for the Seahawks going into this upcoming season. Well, 2023 at that time. I thought their arrow was pointing straight up. I love their 2023 draft class. I really like what they did in the offseason last year. And then they started the season out 6-3, and I'm like, yep, I knew they were going to be good. And then they hit a 4-game skid, ended the season 9-8, missed out on the playoffs. I could not believe it. And honestly, that 4-game skid was franchise-altering, truthfully. And I'll get into that a little bit, spoiler here, but that led to a ton of changes. So, Seahawks, you guys are clamoring to get back to the playoffs. You've got a solid roster. What have you done this offseason to try and get back there? Let's talk about it. So the biggest repercussion from that 4-game skid towards the end of the season that took them from 6-3 to 6-7 was the firing of longtime head coach Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was the head coach for 14 years. Won them a Super Bowl, went 1-1 in the Super Bowl, so 2 appearances. And my first thought was, why now? After a 9-8 season, you pull the plug? I don't know. I was a little bit confused by that personally. Seahawks fans, I'm curious to know what your guys' initial thoughts were on Pete Carroll getting fired. Were you sad? Were you like, okay, thank God? Or were you just like, it makes sense? I'm curious. Let me know down below what you guys thought initially when he was fired, because I don't know how to feel about it. It felt like it was rushed a little bit, but then they go out and they hire Baltimore defensive coordinator Mike Macdonald, and maybe that was the master plan, because I love this hiring. You know, I do not say, I several times have not said a brand new head coach, a first-time head coach, I can't rank him above somebody who has won a Super Bowl or has done it for a long time, but this is probably the closest I've been to doing that, because I think Mike Macdonald is going to be excellent. He's been 10 years in the NFL, 10 years coaching, 9 years he spent in Baltimore, with 1 year he worked at Michigan as a defensive coordinator, and everywhere he's gone, he's succeeded. He's only 36 years old, super young. I like that. I like the young coaches. I like how some teams have done that. It seems to be working well. He's defensive-minded. Normally these young coaches are all offensive-minded, so it's kind of a change of pace. But, man, he had that Baltimore defense absolutely humming last year. So I'm excited to see it. And, first time in his career he's not being led by a Harbaugh brother. Baltimore with John, and Michigan for 1 year with Jim, although he did hire Jay Harbaugh, Jim's son, to be a special teams coordinator, so he had to have a Harbaugh on staff for sure. So I like that move. I'm not gonna call it a positive move, because Pete Carroll, longtime head coach, earned respect. However, I'm very close to calling it positive. We'll call it net even. Let's get into personnel and players lost. And whenever you have a new coaching staff, typically that means a little bit of roster turnover as Macdonald tries to kind of build the team. They lost starting guard Damian Lewis, tough player to lose out of the gate, unfortunately. Really solid guard, got paid very handsomely by Carolina. So now you've got to fill that role on the offensive line. They also lost starting middle linebacker Jordan Brooks, who left for Miami. Fins up. Former first-round pick for them, an absolute tackle machine. Last 3 seasons, he's had more than 110 tackles every single season. Very, very solid. And then they lost 2 of their 3 tight ends. They lost Colby Parkinson, who got paid more than he should have, and they lost Will Dissly, who got paid more than he should have. I'm shocked by these contracts personally, so not a whole lot of bad there. It is hard for them to replace Lewis and Brooks, but they can definitely replace the tight ends with just average level tight ends, in my opinion. Players added through free agency. They did pay a decent chunk of change to bring back Leonard Williams. Gave him 3 years, $64 million, but I do think in Macdonald's defense he'll thrive. Macdonald had that defensive line in Baltimore just nasty, man. And I think Leonard Williams will be very, very solid. I trust Mike Macdonald's evaluation of defensive linemen as well. That will come into play again later. And then they brought back Noah Fant, who will be tight end 1 for better or worse. I don't love him as a tight end 1. I sure hope that they have something else planned. I don't think they do. But he's, I guess, serviceable if you don't plan on using the tight end very much, truthfully. And then I like that they brought a couple cheap additions in too. They had a couple of low-key moves. They brought in Laken Tomlinson, one-year deal to replace Damian Lewis at left or right guard. You can play him at either guard position. I like that move, cheap deal. And then I really do like that they brought Jonathan Hankins in from Dallas. You noticed Dallas's run defense struggled a little bit when Hankins went out. He's great against the run. So another defensive lineman brought back. This defensive line in Seattle could be nasty. So I really like that move as well. Overall, I think for free agency and the coaching moves, we're pretty much calling this net even, right? Lost some guys, but also picked up some guys. So not too much leaning either way, which means that this offseason sort of rides on their draft and how they did in the draft. So let's talk about it. First round, they got one of my personal favorite, not my favorite player, but one of my favorite player to team fits, and that's in Byron Murphy, interior defensive lineman out of Texas. A lot of people had him as the best defensive player in the entire draft. Seattle got to sit right there and take him. One of the highest energy guys in the draft, too, on the field. You can just tell. The guy, he's just a ball of energy, man. It's fun to watch, which is great because it really does offset his smaller size. He's got so much energy where if he didn't have the energy he has, he would not have been, he's not the player he would be because his energy keeps him going, whereas he can just wear down these offensive linemen. Great hands, a good, deep bag of pass rush moves from the interior, which is really nice. And he doesn't have the size of Justin Madubuike. Madubuike is bigger than he was, but I really see him filling a similar role, and I think that's a lazy comparison, but I really do see it. Kind of a quicker defensive tackle in this defensive line. I like him paired up with Leonard Williams. One of them is going to get doubled. You can't double both of them, and that's going to free them up for one-on-ones, and I like that matchup a lot. And you can rotate him out with Jonathan Hankins for the obvious rush plays if you don't feel like he can match up well against the guards. I just think it was a really good pick, truthfully. No second-round pick, but they did have a third-rounder who was like a second-round player, Christian Haynes out of University of Connecticut. Future starter just written all over him. Could have and should have been a second-round player. So they got a second-round player, just got it in the third round. Great anchor and pass pro, explosive athlete for his size. I don't know what kind of offensive scheme Seattle's going to run because it's a whole new setup. That being said, he would absolutely thrive in a wide zone running scheme. I truly believe with his explosiveness, he can get out and get to his marks really, really quickly, and I think he would thrive out there. So I like that pick a lot, and he's a starter for them. I mean, there's your Damian Lewis replacement if Laken Tomlinson doesn't work out. I thought that A.J. Barner, tight end out of Michigan, was solid value. And when you lose multiple tight ends, you got to bring him in. I think Barner can give you similar production to what Parkinson and Disley gave you. So him and Fant are about equal, I would say, to Disley and Parkinson, truthfully. And then one of my favorite picks of theirs was cornerback Nehemiah Pritchett out of Auburn. Great size and length for the position. Freakish athlete. Ran a 4.36 40 with a 1.49 10-yard split. This dude is super quick. Super quick. He's not a great tackler. He's going to have to work on that for sure once he gets to the league, but I think Mike McDonald can coach that up a little bit. Coverage ability is very solid, and in the fifth round, I think that's an absolute steal. That's a great pick by them. Overall, this draft, I think this was a great draft by Mike McDonald and the Seattle Seahawks. They got a young guard to replace Damian Lewis, a stud defensive tackle without having to move up, and then they got a solid tight end and a potential starting corner in the fifth round. I think there's value just littered throughout this entire draft. I think that they had a really good process. And for the second year in a row, I really like the Seahawks draft. So overall, for their draft, I'm going to give them an A, and we'll see how that pans out. But I really like what they did, and I am putting a lot of faith in McDonald's defense, but I saw it firsthand in Baltimore, so I like it. Overall, this offseason, again, like I said, I like what I'm seeing in Seattle once again this offseason. I think you've done really, really well. They've got a ton of talent on the defensive side, and they brought in the perfect defensive-minded head coach, young guy, going to be a player's coach, man. He's going to be excellent out there. So the question in Seattle is, will the offense be able to match the defense? We didn't talk about many additions to offensive weapons at all, minus the tight ends. They're still going to have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Geno Smith is still going to be running the show out there. The new OC, no more Shane Waldron. Every coach from Carroll's staff has now been replaced. So it's going to be a whole new look, and we'll see what they can do. Can they continue to move the ball? We'll find out. But this offseason, I think they've been pushing all the right buttons. And overall, this offseason, I'm giving them an A- grade for the moves that they've made. And that's all I've got for you guys on the Seattle Seahawks offseason. We'll see you guys in tomorrow's video where we're going to talk about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.